Multiverse Ranger. What's up, Multiverse Ranger? I do designs and 3D printing. I'm even grow props. I'm just gonna show you. I'm just gonna run you through how I would approach your project. You know, other people who are kind of into this, right? You can tell me if you agree or disagree with my approach. I'm gonna explain myself as I go down, right? If you feel me, let me know. If you don't feel me, you know, I want to hear about that so I can improve my process, right? That's all. Cool. So starting at the helmet, right? That honestly wouldn't be too difficult for me. That's a fairly simple shape. But here we don't have a like a vacuum press, right? So I can't make visors that accurate and that sharp. So I would have to go to an outside studio for the visor. That wouldn't come at a charge to you, right? That's just included in material cost, right? But the helmet itself, that's not an issue. I want to take a look at this like pauldron piece, this whole chest armor section here. It's clearest to me as a designer right here, so I would honestly even cut off this whole half section right here, and I would only design from right here. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 clear sections plus an orb, right? Those clear sections, to print them, you need to cut them up to be like, you know, printer bed size. But ultimately, that's 5 sections. That wouldn't be too difficult. You can probably, the way I would model armor, I take those into VR, into virtual reality, and I would actually sculpt them out on a body out of just flat planes, just flat, like
Can you record
cubes.
that? If that was a process,
it would be a little difficult, but if there was interest, I could. If there was interest, I could, but I would want to know that there's interest before I did it, because it would be a little difficult to string to nobody. You feel me? But if I would know that, like, I would also make all of these out of flat platforms, because if they were made out of metal, that's how they would be fashioned. They would be either molded, casted, or cut, right? And so I would sculpt those in VR out of flat platforms and make sure they all mesh together. And then I would make sure they all fit around a human body, which is much easier to do over VR. I can effectively put the armor on and make sure, okay, it's good. And then I could just mirror it, because this side is kind of difficult to see, both because there's a play button in front of it and because it's like off-camera perspective, but that wouldn't be too hard. And naturally, by making these shapes,
I'm sure I could get you this original image too.
Yeah, I'm sure that wouldn't be hard. And naturally, by making these shapes, I've left a cavity for this orb, right? And this orb is something that, if you wanted me to design in 3D print, I could honestly do, but it looks like something that would kind of glow and pulsate with energy, right? And those kind of like electrical effects are a little beyond what I do. But if that's what you're interested in, right? If you want that to just kind of be like a solid shape, I got you on the orb. That's not an issue. And then lower, I would do like this solid plate, and all of these would effectively, again, just be like solid shapes that I could mold around a human form in VR, and then make sure they looked appropriate and ship that off as a model. I would make sure it was hollow, make sure it fits. You know, you can move around with it and everything. If it fits, if it jostles around, I can adjust that, you know. And if you're willing to send me your proportions, I could even know, you know, how it looks on you in a virtual setting, to know how you fit into your own armor.
Nice.
Now, that said, for these pauldrons, that would be almost a separate technique that I need to do, because I see that they're not only sharp, right, but they're erratic, right? So I would, for each of these peaks, for each of these valleys, I would need to model each of them individually, as opposed to taking a solid shape and stretching and bending it into the shape that I needed, right? So I would see that I would need to make this peak, and then make this peak, and then make that peak. You know, so I only say this to illustrate probably the effort needed to create this kind of armor, the kind of thing that you're looking for. And then we would segment that off, which, again, that's not hard. And this shape is honestly a lot easier, because that's much more uniform. That's just kind of like some segmenting along the arm. And then we have here a decorative pattern. So this entire pauldron section here, that wouldn't be too difficult to make. It's just that right here we've got those finer details. But the way that I see it, the rest of this armor is actually like soft armor. We're either looking at like cloth, right, or like spandex right here and right here. Maybe even like the under armor right here, where you can see there's still some black. And then we've got almost maybe like leather armor right here. If you want that to be made out of metal, I could handle those shapes. But I would recommend for mobility that if you're looking to wear this in real life around like
the second you want to lift your arm up, that's going to be a problem.
Exactly. The second you want to lift your arm, that's going to be an issue. I would recommend you get that shape out of like leather that you've dyed or something, or cloth that you're comfortable with holding that shape. But I wouldn't recommend that be a hard shape.
I wouldn't even have considered that for the arm movements. I also have that problem with my shoulder pads.
I want you to, like right here, right? We've got an opportunity to make that armor not solid, right? Like this plate can be almost attached via like wires or bands to this plate right here, so you can lift your arms up, right? You've got an opportunity for that to be a segmented place, and where you can take that, I want to take that so you can wear it and be comfortable, right? But I think that's pretty much everything. There's not much like lower body armor showed in this, so I couldn't really cover how I'd handle your lower body. That would be like a separate, more like design concepts type video.
If just spitballing it, if you were to get, what are the arms called? Bracers. If you could, you copy that and just make it for like a calf.
If you just wanted to do a similar design, 100%.
Like it wouldn't match the boot per se.
The outer design I could definitely take and then contour to the shape of a calf. The inner design would be entirely different. So there's still a bit of design work to be done there, just to make sure it can fit around a human leg. You know what I mean? But the outer design, most definitely. Once you've got that shape down, I can definitely take that and adapt it to the shape of other things.
Okay, but this is all right. Now, give me. We're not going to discuss numbers like multiverse. I'll DM you. We'll discuss this privately. We'll see exactly what's in your warehouse. But let's say everything's on board 100%. What's the turnaround time for something like this once you have all your parts?
We're talking just the model.
We're talking just the model.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna break it down by part, right? Because I wanna when I look at this, I don't see it as one project. When I look at this, I look at it as me delivering multiple projects to one person, just because there are different techniques that I'm going to need to use for each individual thing. And that's not to be like, oh, it's like super, super hard. It's honestly not for some of these things, but when I deliver it, I'm not going to deliver it as one thing. It would be ridiculous of me to deliver this as like a single file or a single label. You know what I mean? So I'm going to break it down project by project. The helmet honestly will not be too hard. I want to say it would take me like a week to do the helmet. That's a shape, and then some hard surface sculpting just to get the helmet details in there, because I wouldn't want to just have the shape and then the hard visor without like some surface details, you know. For the body, that's a little more difficult. I want to say honestly maybe about like 4 to 6 weeks, just because I want to make sure it fits to a person. There's going to be some iterative work there where just because I'm only making a model, I'm still going to print like some 2-scale things, make sure that everything snaps together, make sure that everything fits on like a human form. You know, I don't want to ship something that doesn't fit, so I'm probably going to either test on myself or test on someone of similar size, make sure everything fits together. So probably 4 to 6 weeks for that. For the bracers, a shorter time, probably about like 3 to 4 weeks for the bracers. Again, for the same reason that that's something I'm gonna have to fit to human size. Does it rattle in my fist when I'm wearing it? Does it like cut off my circulation? Is it itchy? You know, is there any like considerations there? Because when I hand it off to someone who's gonna ultimately 3D print this, right, I'm gonna have to hand it off with notes. I'm gonna have to hand it off with information like, hey, here's the best way for you to print X thing. Here's the size for this thing. Here's how X thing fits on X person, so they know how to handle it, how to orient it, how to slice it, and how to print it. You feel me? So that's going to take a little bit more time. So the things I don't have to size, easy peasy. The things I do have to size, they're going to take time. Helmets are pretty standard, you know, unless like you've got a non-standard head size. I'm not judging you, but if you got a if you got a non-standard head size, let me know. I'll accompany for that. But helmets are pretty standard, you know, and you can slice them pretty standard. You can make sure they fit together pretty standard. Body armor is a lot more specific, things that fit around the torso, that don't wiggle around, that aren't like squeezing you in uncomfortable ways. So that's something we'll have to communicate back and forth about. And then for pauldrons, to the same thing as body armor, or for bracers, but to the same thing as body armor, but to less of an effect, right? Where they're smaller, so it ultimately won't take as long, and then I'm only going to make one bracer and then mirror it and put it in your other arm. You feel me? So I'm only making one bracer. Let's not pretend here. So I would say ultimately, I think the whole, from start to finish, if I'm just making the model and provided I can get clear communication back and forth, the project, if I'm rushing, should take me about like 2 months, wow. 2.5.
I would want to say 3, just so you weren't running around.
That's if I'm rushing. I said that if I'm rushing date, with clear communication, that's perfect. That's
Okay.
that's a perfect world. That's a perfect outcome. I'm rushing and I've got clear communication. You feel me? So if I'm not rushing, I'm not like tearing my hair out, and you decide that you want to take Saturday to not like deal with me sending you measurements. You feel me? About 3 months is fine from start to finish.
Okay. So yeah, bro, if this is in your warehouse, like we looking around, we trying to figure it out for you. So we've got you a design guy. I know we can get you a print guy. And it's like we don't deserve Kev. He probably painted for you too. We gonna work it out for you, bro. Here we go. We got you.